Denis Bourgeois is affiliate director at HEC, specialized in change, and co-director, one of the first co-director of the CCC, which is the Executive Master HEC Oxford, Consulting and Coaching for Change. Charles-Henri Besseyre is a co-director of the Specialized Master in Human Resources. Bertrand Moingeon is the Dean of Executive Education. Jacques Birol is the former boss of Quelles Job and Publicis Étoile and the current boss of Leçons. And Sabine Henrichfreise is the boss of Filena, which is specialized in organizational coaching.
Good evening. Yes, as Greg said, I was lucky to be the co-director of a program on change. And as you probably may know, the best way to learn is to teach. So as a co-director, I was lucky to have, well, I was teaching some sessions, but many sessions were taught by other colleagues whom I listened to. So I was lucky to listen to, say, like 15 distinguished colleagues from HEC, from Oxford, from the US, or many places where we hired them. And moreover, we were teaching to cohorts of 25, 30 people from various nationalities, various parts of the world, with lots of incredible experience as CEOs, as consultants, and they came to refresh their thinking. By doing that, they helped us learn. So let me just share a few lessons I took from that. Of course, all about change in 15 minutes would be a challenge. So it's just some key points I got from all those exchanges. First one is about time. Yeah. Can we change quickly? It's sometimes what customers or clients ask us. No later than this afternoon, I was with students, and we had a CEO coming to talk about the way he was managing his company, a very innovative, dynamic guy. And he mentioned that at some point of time, they had to launch some kind of HR big change program. And his manager told him, well, we'll need 3 years. It was a company of 800 people. And the boss, who was very impatient and dynamic, said, no way, we'll do it in 6 months. And he said, and we did it in 3 years. So, of course, there can be quick changes if they are technical. But if it comes to real deep changes in values, behaviors, attitudes, I'm doubtful it can be quick. Of course, it can be quicker in a company of 10 people than in a company of 10,000. But it always takes time. Just think of individuals, of ourselves. Sometimes there are events in life that change you in a snapshot, in a few seconds. It happens. Near-death experience or that kind of thing. St. Paul on his way to Damascus. But when was the last time you experienced that? And instead, when was the last time you experienced, oh, I need to be better on that, and I should improve, and I made some progress, but not enough. So, yeah, we need time individually, and we need time collectively. Well, good news, you can probably increase the speed of change for a given company. I know of two ways to do it. First is training. It's a sport metaphor. No, change is something difficult. And like in sport, if you train, if you're used to change, then you can have maybe, you can change more quickly. But it's like in sport. Don't overtrain. Otherwise, when you come to the real competition, you're exhausted. which means in companies who change every 6 months, maybe it's too much for a good training. In other words, the quality and the speed of change is something which depends on the readiness to change before the change challenge comes up. And the second thing is probably establishing a good climate of trust, open discussions, open relationships between people, between hierarchical levels and stakeholders. Why? Because in change, usually you have winners and losers. You have people who have more interest in change than some others. And if there's no habit in the organization of talking of difficult matters, of having the hard conversations where they are needed in a constructive way, then the company is not ready for the change, and it will take more time. So that was the first topic was change. Second is what I called the mechanic syndrome. When your car is broken, you bring it to the mechanic, you give the key, you tell the mechanic, please fix it, and I'll come back tomorrow and take it when it can work. Problem when often when CEOs or top management teams come to consultants and ask them to change, they have the mechanic model in mind, which is fix it for me. And they hardly realize how much they are part of the problem. And it's probably one of the most difficult challenge for change agents to help them understand that. No later, this time not this afternoon, yesterday afternoon, I was talking with a manager, an executive in, European multinational. And they had a problem of lack of cooperation between two business units. They had several business units, and in some territories, or parts of France, because this guy was in charge of France, those two business units could cooperate much more than they did in terms of business development. And when talking with them, they finally admitted that in order for those two business units to cooperate, they should think long-term. If they just think short-term, they don't have any interest or to spend time or energy to cooperate. That's one thing. And second thing, the instructions that they get and the pressure they get from the upper level is short-term, short-term, short-term. So it's some kind of double bind or contradictory instructions. One is, please cooperate, but short-term. So, example of the mechanic syndrome. Of course, a consultant can sell a lot of days, building, days of team building between the two companies, deep cultural studies between the two business units, deep analysis, meetings, kick-off meetings, and so on. But if this dilemma that is imposed by the top management to them is not solved, is not dealt with, well, it probably will be useless. Third thing, strategy. Strategy means should we, when we have facing a change challenge, should we try to do it all at once? Should we do it step by step? Should we play it smoothly, or should we push it and force it? How far can we get people on board, participate and make decisions on that? All that kind of issues. Do we accept that some part of the change goes faster in some part of the organization than some others. And one really striking thing I experienced in this CCC program, particularly the first year. So I had colleagues coming whom I didn't know, and they almost, at least all the people who dealt with this subject said the same thing. And all those people didn't know each other, and sometimes, most of the time, hadn't read what the others had said, but they all said the same. And it's quite simple, good news. If time is short, if you know the solution, and if you have the power to enforce it, go top down. Manage change as a project with schedules, piloting deliveries, and as an engineer would do for, I don't know, for building a bridge or a tunnel. If you don't know the solution, if the solution has to be invented and you don't know it, then you have to play it, I would say, bottom up. Or you have to give a vision, a broad direction, and then unleash the potential of people, get people on board, and let them invent the thing, the company that needs to be reinvented. But for this, you will need more time. Question, but if I don't have time? Answer, then you're done. Based on what I told you previously. Question, and if I don't have the power, if my vision is not legitimate, if people reject my vision, well, then you can shift to a variant to that which I would call the guerrilla, which means when you face a wall and you don't have a caterpillar machine to fall it down, then what you do? Then you look for the crack in the wall, and then with your hammer, you try to enlarge the crack. Of course, it takes more time. You need more time, but that's the only thing you can do if you don't have the legitimacy to enforce your, even to make your vision the legitimate vision in the company. So maybe this last part is what I added, but the two first thing is really what you find in an amazingly unanimous way among people who have thought about what kind of strategy on change. Of course, it's very simplistic. It can, if I had more time, I could go into more details, but this is the key lesson. The unanimous view on that, which is very rare in academic world or even in consulting world. And the last idea I wanted to share with you is the idea about vision. On the it's done on purpose. Yeah, it's to manage expectations. On the first point, I'm quite clear. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm quite clear. On the fourth one, I'm not really clear. It's about vision. What should be a vision, and do we need a vision, which is quite the common view today? I'm not so sure. First, there are various ways to understand this word vision. Of course, you can think of Martin Luther King, his famous speech someday in August '63 in Washington, D.C., I have a dream. I have a dream that someday young girls and young boys, young black girls and young black boys will go hand in hand with your little white friends and so on. Very moving. Probably you know that. If you don't know, you should look at that. It's really, to me, one of the masterpieces of the 20th century. You find this easily on YouTube and so on. It lasts 20 minutes. And quite often, the idea of a vision comes from this kind of thing. A really compelling, moving vision, appealing to values, to high values. And this is no doubt very efficient in mobilizing energy, moving people. problem, can CEOs always use that when being genuine? Probably not. Not always. If they are appointed to deliver, mainly to deliver 15% of return on investment of their shareholders, they cannot really play that. Or if they play that, it might look as it is really faked. So quite often we have this other one, which is we want to be in the first 3 players on the shoestring market. But then, and sometimes you see visions, or you hear visions, which is more or less about that. But it doesn't work so well as the I have a dream. Or if you try, it's I have a dream that one day the shareholder will thank me because I will have delivered 18%. Not really mobilizing. So the first one is very efficient, but not always easy to be up to. Second one is easy, but not very efficient. So do we need a vision in that case? Because it's quite understandable that some people are not in the position to play on the register, or to play the music that Luther King played. I'm not sure it's so much needed. It's needed because people want to know where the boss wants to go. But I was sometimes struck by the fact that even the boss, even in successful companies, people follow the boss not because of his vision. The boss thinks that people follows him because of his vision, but it's not that. I remember once I was talking with a Swedish, a plant manager of a Swedish firm in France, and very innovative management with a lot of implication of employers and employees and so on. And they said, and he told me, ask him, why are they so motivated? And say, because we are customer oriented. That's our thing. We are customer oriented. Okay, so I went because I was interested by this company and his experiments, and I spent one morning with his workers, and they never used the word customer. They never talked about customer until I asked them about it. And of course they say, okay, yes, of course, we need to serve the customer because we rely on him and so on. They were aware that customer was important. But that's not why they loved this company. They loved this company because they were treated fairly. They were given opportunity to develop themselves as professionals. And they were respected. And so they understood that in order for this to continue, well, they had to serve the customer. But the vision of the boss was not the vision, was not what made the people really work hard for this company. It was some kind of fair give and take between them and the company. So I would tend to think that, well, probably a vision is useful, but it's not the real thing. The real thing is, do we treat people correctly? Do we give them the mood to collaborate when the top management needs it, not necessarily share a vision. This might be a bit provocative or contrary to what many people write, but I suppose that's also the point of this evening, to be sometimes a bit provocative. So thank you.
I'm happy to be here, to have first of all a women voice also. Second, I'm German, so which also brings immediately a different perspective to the way maybe I see it. And I would like just to share very briefly what I'm experiencing when working with international organizations and I would say top executives. What I'm seeing today at least is for me 3 or 4 things. First of all, there's a huge loss of energy in the organizations. People are just tired for the moment. They are over-involved in change programs and programs. Very often they are change project number 6 and 7, and today it's called crisis. And what I really think very often what people look for, and I will share a case on this, is a search for meaning, which is why are we doing what we are doing here? And very often when you ask them, and you ask them what have you done today, they say nothing. Nothing. I've done a lot of things, but in fact I've done nothing. And they are coming at a point, a lot of organizations and people, to say this will no more work anymore because they are just tired. So when looking to this, when I go to these organizations and people, first of all, I love organizations and I love the people. And I really, I'm always impressed of what people do in the situation where they are, because it's really a lot of things they do. And first of all, I would say one of my ideas also is, in order to know what is possible, let's try the impossible. So at least I'm more on this not reasonable part. Even as a German, I have that reasonable part in me. But my first approach is working with people about what do you think is impossible so that we can check whether things are possible or not. Second approach is to say, in fact, what happens is we are facing the results of our solutions of yesterday. It's nothing more than that. What we are facing today is exactly the result of our solutions of yesterday. Meaning we are 100% responsible for what is happening in the organizations. Because we are part of the organization. The second or third point I'm very often very, I would say, curious about is like, I see a tendency that we want to change things. Organizations, procedures, products, but we cannot, I mean, what is happening in terms of change? First of all, I think we should avoid the word change today, because more you speak about change, less people are interested in working with it. So when you start, it's like synergy, you know, when you are in a merger and you say synergy, it's like, oh my God, this means not a job for me. So it's immediate blocking word. So it's like change today. A change project means something, again, which very often starts at the stop and stops in the middle very often in terms of experience. So what does change mean? Change means very often, if we look to organizations as a living system, and I will not go more into detail like this, but if we take for 1 or 2 minutes the idea that organizations are living systems, that means that the fundamental part of organization or living systems means networks of conversations and interactions. This is the fundamental part of a living system, meaning interaction, and in organizations, conversations. So this means if we want to change, we have to go through interactions and conversations and into the space between what is happening between people. So I'm coming back on this, which means in the end, I'm interested in the question of brief change or not. I think it's possible. I think it's possible. But the first thing is to do, we have to stop all what we have done up to now. Because this is probably what we have tried already 5 or 6 times and which doesn't work. So it doesn't mean we can do it again. So we have to innovate and find something else. So it can be very quick, but first of all, how can we stop doing things? Second, how can we work together? Because I think we cannot take it in a way that I can do it alone. It's a question of collective performance. It's no more individual performance. It's collective results, collective success, and the idea of living systems. So to just give you an illustration very briefly on how I've done it with one organization. So it's an international organization. Many cultures are presented. And in fact, what happened very often today, it's one of these engagement or stress surveys. It's like we do a survey whether people are engaged or not, and normally the result is people are not engaged enough. So, but I mean, this is, more you ask them, more they think about. So they have taken this idea, and when they called me, they said, we have to do a management or training program on engagement. And I said, this is something interesting, but no. Because probably it will be just based on a symptom, but it will not address the real things. And so we finally said, yes, if we want to change this, the question is how can we evolve in the way to interact between us. So then the next step was, do we an official change program or not? So I said, no official change program, we do it in a different way. On emergency, on emergence and emergency, but not on an official statement. The third point then was, okay, how we can do it very briefly. We started in February, and we are now, let's say, 7 months later, and at least I can share with you where we are, because I've been there this morning, so at least it's fresh what I can tell you. And so what we have done is we said, okay, we will do something else, which is how we can engage all the people around the question of engagement by bringing it to a meaningful question. And the meaningful question for this company was, how can we co-create the pleasure to come to this company every morning? How can we have recreate collectively the pleasure that everybody comes to this company every morning motivated? And based on this, we started the whole process of thinking and working. And the first thing we started is to get an agreement from top management, which basically was accepted. And the top manager said 2 things. First of all, we do not intervene, and we accept everything what is proposed from the bottom-up structure. No intervention, no control, we take it. Okay, we create the space that you with your group can make it happen. Based on this, we made the first gathering in June, I think, yes, it was in June, with 200 people of the company, based on 2 questions is, what is necessary or what we have done up to now to create the pleasure to come to this company every morning. So we have identified success strategies and what didn't work. We have done this in a gathering of 200 with a specific methodology. And in the afternoon, we have asked, what do you think are the most important workshops you want to launch now, collectively? And we have done it in the afternoon. In the afternoon, we had about 10 workshops in parallel with the specific organizations. And based on that, there was one formula, which finally has been a sort of mantra, leitmotif for the next month, and still is. So it's very good in French. In English, it's less evident. But in French, it's plaisir plus sens égale performance. Pleasure and meaning means performance. So how can we get pleasure to be there, meaning to be there, and if these 2 are connected, performance will happen. And based on what was the outcome of these workshops was a sort of idea of what could be a different management style and what could be the values in terms of behavior, not in terms of vision, but in behavior, in terms of what can I do on a day-to-day basis so that there is a different atmosphere of pleasure. And they engaged individually. And based on that, they have proposed a workshop with top management. And in fact, top management gathered, I would say, 4 weeks ago to continue with the top management at this moment present, but still not intervening. Just saying, yes, we follow, and this is our engagement we take. And there is where we are today, and I would say the most important indicator we are looking for is the indicator of interaction. Is my interaction producing energy for the other or not? Is it nice that people meet me in the company? You know, the question was, when people meet me, am I a vampire of energy or I'm a generator of energy? You know, these people, you meet them and you feel better, you get energy, and or these vampirizing of energy, you meet them and then no more energy. So, and they have engaged in different individual ways of interconnecting. So indicator was put in place, how is interaction managed, followed up in terms of energy management. And second, the second focus point was efficiency of collective meetings. Because very often meetings are not really efficient. People say it. On my German point of view, something in France and other cultures, it's like, you say you start at 7, and finally it starts at 7:15. So I'm now 20 years in France, and it's just, I'm used to it, But when I have to intervene with my German colleagues, I make them used to it, that they are stressing already. So, they have their own problems of efficiency in Germany, so we do other things over there. But it's just really interesting. So the whole focus in how to make these meetings efficient on the top level and the middle level and bring it to collective working groups. And for the moment, what we see, we have about 300 people involved. Everybody uses more or less the same words. And the question very often is it we are creating pleasure here in the meeting or not? Do we are focusing on the meaning we have as an organization, which finally the meaning of this organization, and it's true, it has been the case since 20 years, which is helping cultures to cooperate and understand each other. And they had lost the meaning of this in between them, in the inner side of the organization. So now we look at this, whether this is working, and there we are. So there will be the next big step in 3 weeks when they rechange not the organization at all, but the way to have meetings, to create meetings differently. And the focus point is not adding things, stopping things. What can we do? What can we stop? And what can we add? Because if you stop things, naturally something new is possible. So the question for them is, okay, what do we stop? What do we stop? And if you work just on stopping, it's very hard for people to say, this is we stop. It's like they cannot stop anything. It's like we have to do more, and we have to deliver more. And if you say in the end you have an action plan, you have already 20 demotivated people, because they are all overloaded with action plans. So the idea is to make stopping plans, which is a lot of action in fact, but at least it's stopping plans and stopping practice. So this means it's a different way of looking to it as a living organization, and the idea is the next step will emerge. We will see where the energy goes, and when there is a project, when a manager wants to launch something, we follow, based on the idea that there are always co-actors which want to contribute to the success of the company. This is very briefly I want to share, so it's maybe a little bit different, but since we are on the provocative theme this evening, it was just a pleasure, and questions maybe after, or that is just what I wanted to share.
Evening to all. After this two brilliant, presentation, we find a bit difficult to follow these speakers. So I'm going to talk a bit about we have heard good news. We have heard questions around vision. I do think that you address a real important issue. You say something that was very important. You say to some extent the people, we want to get the people fairly treated, respected, and that's a great. And you mentioned the question of meaning, the question of interactions between people, and I do think that HR has a role, and that's why I wanted and I proposed to talk about HR, and the first thing I want to say, HR is a difficult topic. It doesn't work. Oh, sorry. I'm going very fast. Okay, I was looking at okay, the HR is obviously a field everybody knows, has been experienced. I just showed you that HR, the first issue about change is changing HR itself, and as you may know that the function, representing the HR, is not known to be a really proactive. I am sorry for the HR people maybe in the room, but it's always interesting to look at the change process, whatever, or transformation, and to see what is the role of HR. If you look at just this historical side, most of the people, and I guess in your companies, they would describe HR still in the bottom part, more administrative, legal, or maybe some people doing some psych things. So the thing is, why are we stuck in these roles? Most of the organizations, maybe because we don't have the right education, in the schools, in the universities, about what is the role of HR. Or maybe the people themselves of HR are they basically play these roles and they want to stay in these roles. Then you have the word managerial. I just remind you, the managerial means that managers are involved, I would say. That's basically a state where you've got a situation where the people are involved, obviously, through their daily activities. The managers are involved, and that's why you have this kind of vertical dimension called line manager's responsibility. And then you have 3 words on the top. 3 words, and I put it these words in red just because I do think that we are far from having these kind of roles played in most organizations. And that's basically one issue around change, because we don't have the HR people. What I say strategic, again, I'm saying understanding what are the issues with the business. And if they were able to understand the issues with the business, then they would maybe play a more active role in the change processes, you see. And then I put the word innovative. Maybe it's a field where, in fact, that when you have a business decision to make, they may think a bit differently. Just question of time. We were addressing this issue of time earlier, and I do think HR doesn't have the same time frame as finance, marketing, or whatever you can think. So they could think a bit differently. The last word is marketing, as you see. And marketing is, we have to address more and more now lots of issues around what kind of people we want to attract, what kind of people we want to promote, what kind of people we want to reward, and so on. And the word diversity, I mean, it's a fad maybe to some extent, but it's really a strategic issue. We have to think of how we can create an organization where people actually are different but interact correctly and respect each other. That's very important. And you see, when we talk about change, we talk about values. We already mentioned this issue of values. And what I have, sorry, I'm going to close this one, so that would be easier. So what I have here is just a model, a well-known model, where I see that most of the organizations have gone through a number of phases. We all started like little bureaucracies, rules. For those who remember, 30 years ago, equality was the key word. Everybody was treated equally in most organizations, equal pay raise and so on. And then you have got the clan. The clan is the Japanese model. The Japanese model, everything is collective. Loyalty is critical. And then you have got all these moves during the 90s towards the market, the finance. Performance is the key word, and short term. And then there is this strange word, I guess most of you know this word created by Mintzberg, the term of autocracy, which means innovative, changing organization. That's where, by the way, where you have the change situation, which is the most present, And the problem we have to face is how we can move, and most organizations are moving to some extent from the left side to the right side, just because of this kind of opening situation. We have to get this world, into the organization. We have to have lots of more and more transactions. Everything, has been, if you look at just the technological factor, I've been for several years looking at the impact of mobile technologies, Who remember 10 years ago we didn't have a single mobile tool in our pocket. Today it's the case. Everybody is, and it has changed our lives. The problem is how we deal with the change, you see. So HR has a lot of, I would say, tensions to manage, and clearly we have to, when we make a decision what we should be doing, for instance, should we be more centralized or decentralized, a classical change issue, structural issue, what is the role of managers regarding HR, and again, lots of companies have a lot of responsibilities to managers. The problem is how far we, in some organizations, and I just remind you, some telecom organizations, without giving you a name, to some extent, maybe we have been too far in this kind of organization. So the problem is, what is the balance? And so on, individual and collective. There was this tendency in the past 15 years to give a lot of dimension, to individualization of HR, personalization. The problem is how far we have been, and again, how can we recreate a good being together, which is this kind of interaction, the collective aspect. The good news is, even in strategy, and my colleague on the right, I hope may agree, we have a good news. We have a good news because if you remember, the field of strategy was obviously based, and I just make it very simple, on the Porter model. And the Porter model is really interesting because it's taught in most strategy seminars, you know, all strategy seminars, and it's basically telling us that organizations have to look at their environment to position themselves, and that's the first column you've got, the second column, I would say. Then you have the middle column. The middle column is interesting because it says, why do we have huge differences? I'm going to give you an example of one company, SAS Institute, you may know, that has been successful in the past 30, 35 years today. And this company, I think, has applied in the past 35 years a number of ideas we have already heard since in the last hour. And this company is different, very different from the other in the same business. Why this company has been such an innovation in the past 35 years? They develop some unique resource, that's the concept of resource, some core competencies that are very different from their competitors. And as you say, interaction and meaning, that's the keywords they are using in this company. And the CEO doesn't have a clear vision, by the way. That's why he is really willing, he wants to get the pleasure every day to these people, you know, and the business is through the people. And the last is what my colleague on the right, Bertrand, is going to discuss, is obviously the third column talks about what will be coming, what are the issues coming today and tomorrow. And the issues are basically, we have to be innovative, we have to renew, we have to learn, we have to, and you know, the key capital is human. That's why I think this table is interesting, because it gives more reason to believe that obviously human capital and the HR function that is supposed to be involved in the human capital management has to play a key role. I show you this slide. So it's not. It's a bit. Sorry. It's a bit the same slide as my colleague. The first, except it's a curve. You see. So that's not the goal. That's the result. But that's an interesting story. You see, when you see the curve, the number of firms would like to get this kind of results after 35 years. Look at what they've got. Some awards, and you may like it or you may dislike it, but you've got, for instance, the Great Place to Work award, you know, and this they obtained in the US at least the #1 slot in 2010 and 2011. You know, so it's again, it's a story where you see some results. And one of the key issue is what they say, that we invest in in talent or in people. Satisfied employees will obviously transform into the situation into satisfied customers and then financial results. So again, there is some sort of virtuous circle in the past 35 years that was never, you know, even in difficult times, that never stopped. Even in 2009, the CEO said, sorry, there won't be any layoffs as much as I can. And there was not a single layoff in 2009, despite the downturn of the business. You know, so there is some lesson there. When they keep the people, I mean, I would say that means they keep their words, they keep, no, it was not a vision. They say we invest in people we want, even in difficult time, to keep those people. The philosophies are very simple. You see, fairly and equally, that's interesting, because they have the concept of fairness, but they also say we have to have equal treatment of people. That's a very strange mix of fairness and equality. Dignity and respect, a key word, and that's not you know, some sort of values you find on the walls. It's an everyday behavior. You know, the people should be trust. Concept of trust is very critical, and no workday stress, work-life balance. They have a 35 hours a week policy, even before our you know, legal requirement. That's interesting. This company has been doing the 35 hours a week, you know, for a very long time. You can call this company after 5 p.m. on Friday, you won't get anybody. So that's interesting in terms of, and it's a US company, okay? I just remind you this model, at the end of the day, is HR involved? The Carter model is quite famous, you know? And again, it's a very step-by-step model, so it's a very planned, you know, that's typically what I call an Anglo-Saxon approach of change. But when you look at what Carter proposed, and when you now relate this model to the, and that will be the last slide about HCL. You know, HCL Technologies is this Indian company. So that's interesting. It comes from an emerging country. And the first, you know, this company is quite famous today, especially because the CEO published a book last year that was translated in French this year, Employees First, Customer Second. You know, when I found this book a year and a half ago on the shelf in India, I was in India, and I thought this guy is a bit strange, you know, because the title was a bit provocative. But if you look at what he has been able to do, in fact, he has, used a number of ideas you suggested in the two first, you know. The results, you see the results, but what is most important in the book is what is the change process he has tried to implement. And for those who were, some of you were maybe at the presentation of Vinet Nayar a month and a half ago, you know, he used a lot of time the concept of experimentation. He said we did a lot of experiments. That means it was not like a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. He used a number of experiments, and at the end, he kind of formalized his journey. It talks about the journey and not a process, you see, where basically, you see, create the need for change. I mean, and it was, I don't know if it's a vision to some extent, but at least they realized that everyone had to change, and the first person to change was the CEO himself. So that's then the creating a culture of change, this idea of trust through transparency, where, for instance, he created a system where anyone could report about some problems, difficulties with support function. And by the way, HR was also criticized. So that's interesting. HR was forced to change through some sort of what he called ticket. That's the word used, ticket, to try to document some problems. And the goal of this experiment was to reduce to zero. In fact, at the end of the day, then you see the pyramid, and that's a structural change. And then the transferring the responsibility for change. He clearly said, my role is not to be the guide. Everyone, and that's, you know, to put the change really down in the organization. So at the end of the day, you know, you've got an organization which is today one of the most, I think, in this industry, if I am correct, in 2010, they were the most successful one, the highest growth, you know, the most, I would say, highly satisfied customers, and really some, I would say, learnings we can get from this company, emerging country. You know, so lots of interesting ideas coming from India. Okay, so that's clearly what I could say. And again, this company, as you say, relationship is critical in this story. You see, and the meaning, what are we doing? And these people, you know, the CEO first, but obviously everyone is very clear that he should not be the guy we have to talk to. He doesn't want to be the guide. Everyone has to be its own guide. I told him.
So I'm quite impressed to be here. Here I have the cream of consulting, here the cream of knowledge. 6 months ago I received a phone call from a friend of mine working at Roland Berger. We say Roland Berger, I never know how to pronounce it, okay? And she said to me, Jack, would you come to London to make a speech on innovation? It's a topic you know, maybe you will be interested in. I said, why? Can you tell me a little bit more about it? And she told me, okay, we are working on a 1,500 people company, fast growing in high tech, and we have to announce major changes. We are in a reorganization process. The problem is 50 people, 50 top executives are coming to London in a couple of weeks. They come from United States, from the States, they come from Europe, and some from South America. The problem we have is that we have nothing to tell. We are not ready. Nobody is ready. And really, we need to change. Everybody needs to, and they are really waiting for a big change. And sincerely, we don't know what to do. Though, you know, they could have taken, I don't know who, but they say, okay, Jack, can you play something? And I say, okay, I understand. And sincerely, I feel really uncomfortable. I feel really uncomfortable. Why? Because sincerely, I had some pride because it was the first time Romberger called me to say, bring me some help. Okay, so humbles. It was a very good prize. I said, okay, it's a very good prize. And I was confident in captivating them, but absolutely sure to disappoint them. Because people, they were not waiting for that. And it will be absolutely non-productive. Right, can we wait a minute, think just a little bit about that, and what could you do really? And I said, okay, you don't know where to go, you don't know where to go, so let's go. What do you mean, Jack? Let's start change. Train, just train, change. So, take a bet, I take a bet with you, okay? Give me 1 hour and a half. And during the 1 hour and a half, I will split it in three parts. The first half an hour, or a little bit more, I will create the mood, create some mood, and then we work together, and then we will look at what we do. The only thing I need, I need the CEO to be okay to do what we did, what we will say we will do. Otherwise, I don't come. Okay? Because it's no use, okay? And you should, and we need to team up, right? So we team up. That's okay. This is say, okay. There is no risk for you. If it doesn't work, it's my my problem. If it works, it's for you. So, okay. So we did it. So, second slide. Here. Oh, là, voilà. Sorry. Okay. So let's move. Okay. Okay. So the idea was. I'm sorry. The idea was. Well, let's move. So I come to them and say, okay, we're gonna start change. I say, but where do we go? I say, I don't know. We're gonna start change. Okay. So are you okay on the program? We're gonna spend 1 hour and a half, and we're gonna start change. I say, well, where to go? This is not a problem. We're gonna start change. Okay. So I fixed the agenda with them, and I told them afterward, okay. First thing, where are you great? You're great, actually. They are great. You're a champion in that. You're the big champion. Okay, give them some confidence. And then I told them, second one is, wow, thank you. You've got pains. You've got a lot of pains. You've got a lot of pains. You've got pain in the organization, pain in the IT, all the pains you all know, because otherwise we will not be here, okay? You've got the pains of growth. You've got all the pains of growth, okay? So what could we do? And you feel really uncomfortable. But the question is, you're a top manager, right? You're the 50 top manager of the company. Uncomfort should be your comfort zone. If you are not comfortable in uncomfort, you're not top executive. That's all. The difference between top executive and executive is feeling comfortable in uncomfortable zone. And if you don't do it, lets you know this is not your place. But I know this is the place you are. So let's feel uncomfortable. And to bring you some comfort, I will give you some from an entrepreneurial point of view, let me give you 5 insights of behaviors, of how you should behave to make change happen. Not what change happen, how should you behave to make change happen? And I know from my experience there are the 20-80 which works. Okay, so believe, sorry, because I'm not good with slides. Okay, 5 entrepreneurs inside, I will tell you afterward. One of them was believe in move. The 5th one was believe in move. I say, okay, so is it clear for you? So I say, okay, it's interesting. Okay, now we are in an high-tech company, so I'm suggesting to you to use a very high-tech tool. You know those high-tech tools also, okay? So, okay, let's take Post-it. Let's take Post-it. Let's be a little bit more precise. You've got only one Post-it. Not 2, not 1. You've got only one Post-it. And you've got only one change to do next Monday. Next Monday. You, not for you personally. Next Monday, what will you change? And they say, but what for? This is not the question. What will you change next Monday? We are on Wednesday, next Monday, you write, and you have 30 seconds afterwards to explain to your colleagues why the single thing you will change next Monday. Okay, it can work, you can think about it. Okay, now put on the wall and explain why. And we will see, I say them, and we will see. I don't know what will happen, but we will see. I mean, I'm precise. Physically, we will see. Not fancy, imagine. We will see. We will see 50 with explanation, with meanings, and we will see what happens. So, okay, d'accord. And what happened? What happened? Let's say two-thirds of the post-it were about better communication between us. Let's be a little bit more precise. We're the top executive, there's a fast-growing company, and we really get away from our people. Okay, we have startup roots where we no longer know the people who are with us. So this is absolutely dramatic. And really, and they come up with, let's say, sensible ideas, you know. For example, I will smoke again. I mean, that's precise. That's become to be interesting. Why I will smoke again? But I see, 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking between the coffee, and now there is no longer coffee. They are just smoking outside. 2/3 of the people are smoking outside. Where do I meet them? So, should I smoke again? Should I make only coffee? I really do. Another say, okay, I will put sneakers on Fridays. I will take my old sneakers and put my sneakers on Fridays and open my gate because this is a sneaker days. I will make a sneaker days. A sneaker days where all idea will come up just like before. And we had a bunch of ideas like that. Very, very simple, pragmatic. But I mean where they will do it. So they will make some visible things next Monday, right? And what they realize together, which that's what was interesting, they realize that they share the same idea. And that if they don't do that now, they will not implement a very big plan afterwards. Because if they have not the relation with their people, nothing will happen afterwards. And actually, this was the priority. Imagine this priority had come from a top-down priority, it will not have worked. But if they say, okay, we know we do it, and they say, okay, just package it, just do it, endorse it, and just make it. And they did it, right? The lesson is, let go. Sometimes let go. Sometimes let go. Sometimes if the people, if they don't know how to change, they are not top executive. That's as simple as it is. If they have no idea of the change they can make personally, if it is not their place. That is a very good test, very good test. So, and they are empowered to do it. This guy do it next Monday. And if they show some changes, they put the machine of change on work. That's absolutely critical. Second thing, make it visible. Make it visible, not only in your mind, physically visible. Change something in the office. Change. And third thing, act small. Act small. Act small. Act small, fast and small. And let's say, I say, if you put action in, you get action out. If you put fast in, you put fast out. Garbage in, garbage out. It's all the same thing. Yeah? Garbage in, garbage out, blah, blah in, blah, blah out. No, I mean, it's a very simple lesson of change. Yeah? Fast in, fast out. Action in, action out. Blah, blah in, blah, blah out. Garbage in, garbage out. It's, see, last in, last out. It works in any topic, okay? So, but do it. But do it, right? Did it work? Sincerely, I don't know. I get a 30% bonus because I negotiated a 30% and I get it. So I thought they were satisfied. Did it work? I think it worked partly, but other change happened afterwards. And I don't know if it had worked just like I would have dreamed it. But I'm sure the people, now they know that they can start change without really knowing exactly what to do, but having trust in change. And I think that the key thing is having trust in change. If you don't have trust in change, you will not change. And the trust in change depends on the behavior of the people, and not of what they say, but what they do. You know, that's exactly what Vin did. I do it, And he could have said, okay, he does it. The chief does it. Okay, so get Lagnac. The chief should have Lagnac. If the chief has not Lagnac, they say, okay, blah, 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 okay? That's exactly. So do it for you. And afterwards, you can start change. And afterwards, you don't need me any longer. Thank you for your attention.
And it's a very energetic presentation. That's what we need at this time of the day. I have a couple of slides, but I'm aware that it's 20 past 8, and I think the best thing is not necessary to overload you with too many slides. First of all, I would like to tell you that I'm very happy to be here because I have a feeling that we all belong to a community of practice, in the sense that we all belong to a community of people who consider that change is important and that our role is to contribute to make change happen. During my presentation now, I would like to share with you some ideas and also get your input on this topic. And especially we already mentioned many important things, the importance of time and timing, the role of interactions, the importance of human capital, the need to build trust, and through behaviors, not just by speaking, but by demonstrating that there are good reasons to trust the others. Now, I would like to add another step to this discussion is about the notion of reflectivity, the capacity to reflect on our own practice as change agents. And I think it's, at least for myself, something very important. And as an academic, as a manager, I think it's important to spend some time to think about what we do and why we do things. So that's basically the kind of message I would like to deliver tonight. I try to apply this to myself. So I say, okay, Bertrand, when you manage your team, or when you intervene in a company, or when you teach in the programs, what are your underlying principles? What are the kind of basic assumptions on which I build intervention or change initiatives? Of course, I try to build on some pieces of research, and I will discuss that later on. But there are additional kind of values or objectives I have in mind. First one is hic et nunc. I think that when we speak about intervention, it's very important to have people here, not people checking their email, thinking about the next meeting. We need to create opportunities. And it's essential for me to create such opportunity for people to be here and now. The challenge for me at the moment is to have you benefiting of the time you have all together and not checking your emails or doing other things. I need to create an opportunity to have you here at now, hic and nunc. So that's my first kind of principle. The second principle is when we intervene, when we manage change initiatives, why do we want to do that? And I sincerely think that at the end of the day, I think it's because I think it's important to create a better world, to make things better. I had the great honor to work with very prestigious colleagues. I spent 1 year at Harvard working with Chris Argyris, who is really a pioneer in this approach of how can we create a better world. I had the opportunity to publish a paper with Mohamed Yunus. Some of you may know him. He's the founder of Microcredit and of Grameen Group. And again, it's fascinating working with those people because they have a vision. They have a vision, and they think that the reason why they are on Earth is to help organizations, to help society, to alleviate poverty. So there is a real vision. So I think that vision is important in this situation. I agree with what Denis said before about the complexity of dealing with this notion of vision. It's not just, the vision cannot be a 10% increase, sales increase. It's, I want to fight poverty. This is Mohamed Yunus' vision. Chris Argyris says, I am a professor, interventionist, because I want to create a better world. So that's second principle. Third principle is carpe diem. It's another thing which, okay, when carpe diem is, I said, where is it coming from? It's coming from Epicure, who said it's important to balance happiness and wisdom. And I think it makes sense. So when we do something, we need to manage change initiatives using this principle, using this idea that carpe diem, we are here to not only create a better world, but also to give opportunity to develop happiness and wisdom. Last but not least, but basically my fourth principle is cogito ergo sum. Cogito ergo sum, it's, what does that mean? That means that we need to develop self-awareness, self-consciousness. We need to help people around us, but also ourselves, to act as reflective practitioners. So a reflective practitioner is someone who is able to step back and to think about the way he or she behaves. And we will see that it's not so easy to do that. So now we'll move to my first slide. That being said, so having surfaced the underlying principles, when I discuss with executives in companies, what do they tell me? They tell me that they face a challenge. They face a challenge because, in fact, they have to do two things, and especially in this period at the moment of kind of permanent crisis. It's not anymore a crisis, it's the current situation. They need to do more of the same. In other words, they need to seek best practices, but they also need to think about the next practice. So best practice, but also next practice. Best practice is about improving the situation. It's what I call it requires what I call a learning how capability. I did some research with a colleague at Harvard on how can you explain that some organizations are more efficient than others. And we can see that in some contexts, there are some organizations that are very good in improving their processes, their routines, and what is expected from consultants is then to help the companies to do more of the same, which is important to be more efficient. But it's not enough. We know that today it would be crazy to say, okay, we just need to do more of the same. We cannot continue doing more of the same. We need at the same time to continue to be efficient and to try to be more efficient and to revisit the business models on which we have built our past success. We need to move from a logic of pure exploitation of what we already know to a logic of exploration. I don't know if you are familiar with this notion of blue ocean strategies from Kim and Bober and two colleagues from INSEAD. It's very interesting because this is really this notion of we absolutely need to introduce radical innovation. So again, as interventionists, consultants, coaches, whatever, there is here a real expectation from company. Please help us to do more of the same, logic of exploitation. At the same time, please help us to think out of the box, to revisit the business models on which we built our company. What I would like to do now is to make a brief presentation. I know it's late, so I won't go into all details. It's a piece of research we published again with Amy on what are the different theories about change management. There are different theories that tend to focus on, let's study the organization, the collective level. We'll focus on the contribution of individuals. the first two boxes here and here, the common denominator is that the objective is to provide detailed description of a phenomenon. So if we think about Michel Crozier, well-known French sociologist, is excellent in the sense that he equips us with a grid of analysis. But keep in mind, his objective or his contribution is to describe a phenomenon. I will come back to this in a few minutes. Another example is Jim March, for instance, the notion of organizational routines. He said, okay, when an organization learns something, in fact, an organization creates new routines. If there is a problem for the French railways, an accident, for instance, the organization will study what happened, and then they create new routines to prevent that in the future. So he said, okay, organizations learn because they create new routines which are independent for people who are within the organization. In the upper right category here, you have people who describe intervention strategies. Oh no, it's not intervention strategies. They describe how individuals learn in organizational context. There are a lot of interesting works at the moment on communities of practice. How can we learn by belonging to a community of practice? For instance, a researcher would observe you tonight and say, okay, what did you learn from participating in this kind of event, and to what extent do you benefit from meeting other colleagues, those kind of works. The kind of piece of research I'm going to focus on now is this subcategory here. The main objective is to make change happen. So the goal of researchers is to develop theories about making change happen. And it's very important when you reflect about your own way to intervene or to lead changes in companies. It's important that you are aware of the kind of theory you use when you behave. That's what it is to be a reflective practitioner. It's just say, okay, wait a minute. What is the theory I use? The problem is too often we use theories which has been developed to describe a phenomenon, but which doesn't say much about how to make change happen. In this category, I will not go into all details, you have researchers who spend their life in developing actionable knowledge, creating actionable knowledge that we can use, and if we use those pieces of knowledge, then change will happen. I will focus on this category here is the mental models of people in companies. Is to make change happen. If I take the example of Chris Argyris and Donaldson, we call that the theory of action perspectives. Their contribution is key for me because they show that, as it has been said in the example just before, that if you want to make change happen, you absolutely need to work on the mental models of the people. For Richard Hackman here, for instance, he thinks that if you have clearly defined the organization, clearly defined the roles, then change will happen. So this is a way, I'm not saying he's wrong, but this is his own perspective about making change happen, is organizational design. I will work on the structure and then change will happen. Here it's a different perspective. I will start working on the individual and then of course on the culture structure, but I will start focusing on the individual mental models to make change happen. So again, I invite you to reflect on your own theory of intervention or your own theory of how to make change happen. We all use theories of action, not in the academic world. We have in mind, and again, it's a contribution from Chris Argyris, we have in mind if-then propositions. If I do that, then this will happen. So if I allocate enough time for it, then this will happen. If I'm able to make people accountable, then I will be able to initiate change. And in fact, when we intervene, if we act as reflective practitioner, we should consider that it's a research project. We will test our own theory of how to make change happen. If I do that, then this will happen. I observe, and is it correct or not? So this is what it is about when we speak about being a reflective practitioner. I would like now to illustrate, because it's late and I think it's better to use examples, with two examples. I will share with you two stories, true stories. And I will make a prediction. I will tell you one story, we'll discuss the story, then I will present a second story, and my prediction is you will have a different view on the first one after we have discussed the second one. You understand? So describe the first one, we make some comments, I move to the second one, we discuss the second one, and then you basically change your mind regarding the first one. Okay, so let's start with the first story. It's a story of a CEO with the owner of, also the owner of a company, and who apparently sincerely believes that innovation is the key success factor for his company. So he has built all its strategy about developing innovation, being an innovative company, being perceived as an innovative company. This CEO has a daughter, and the daughter has a boyfriend, this is a true story, who works in this company, in the R&D department. And of course, after a couple of time, the boyfriend is invited for lunch on Sunday, and at dessert time, the CEO, of course, asked the question, hey, Peter, what do you think of my company, of the company? Do you like working in this company? What is your prediction? What did he say? Yeah, sure. So yeah, sure, it's a great company, and it's a very innovative company. And say, oh, that's a good guy. It's so, and after a couple of months, 5, 6 times, he's invited here. The CEO say, okay, as usual, say, okay, are you always happy with the company? And then the guy was more confident, say, I have to tell you something. You know, you speak about innovation, but people don't trust you. The CEO say, well, what do you mean people don't trust me? Because we think we are not an innovative company. I will give you an example. The example is, we have 240 checks before a new project got approved. The CEO said, no, it's not possible. So the CEO was very, very surprised. This is on Sunday, lunchtime. Monday morning, executive committee meeting. The CEO arrives and say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, I have something I would like to check with you. I heard that we may have 240 checks before a new project get implemented. Apparently nobody have no idea at all about how many checks. So the CEO said, okay, now let's stop here. I would like you to come back in 15 minutes, but I would like to know how many checks do we have. 50 minutes later, they came back and say, yes, that's true. We have 240 checks. And the CEO say, okay, you know, this is a problem. And everybody, all members of the executive committee say, oh, we agree, that's a problem. There is a gap between what we say and what we do. Between what Chris Hadris called the espouse theory and the theory of action. And they say, let's ask a consultant to help us, and we want to get results as soon as possible. 1 week later, the consultant came back and said, I have good news to share with you. We now have 80 checks before a new project got approved. Okay, that's my first story. So if I recap, the CEO learned on Sunday that there are 240 checks. Monday morning, he checks himself. So he said, okay, is it true? They said, yes, it is. Then they asked a consultant. They set up a task force. They came back 1 week later, 80 checks. What do you think? That's another way to see the story. But you see, we have two ways to see the story. One is, which is important, how many steps. Another way to see the story is, how can that happen? That those guys are not aware that there are 240 checks. Okay, I will move to my second illustration, which is exactly aligned with this. The second illustration is cost reduction program. And again, it's a true story. I mentioned Chris Argyris before. Chris Argyris told me this story, and I think I really like it because it really illustrates what we mean by organizational learning, or more precisely, double loop learning. I will illustrate that in a few minutes. The story is the following one. Chris was walking on the street at Cambridge, close to Harvard, and he met one of his former students. And the guy said, "Hey, Professor Argyris, you don't recognize me?" And Chris said, "No, I'm sorry. I was with you 20 years ago, and now I'm the CEO of a company." And say, "Oh, that's good for you, great things." And he said, "I would be very honored if you would accept to meet my executive committee. We have a meeting next door. So would you come just with me? I would be delighted to introduce you to my team." Chris Argyris, who is a very nice person, said, "Yes, I don't have much time, but 10 minutes is okay." So he came, he entered into the meeting room, and there was the executive committee here, plus a consultant. And they were celebrating the end of a consulting assignment, which is unusual. It was about cost saving, and they organized a champagne party to celebrate the cost saving. But that means that they were very happy. So in fact, the consultant has been able to reduce dramatically the costs without creating a lot of tension within the company. So Chris was there. They said, "Okay, Mr. the consultant, we wanted to thank you, to congratulate you. You did a great job at CEO speaking." And then, of course, the consultant say, "Without your help, Mr. the CEO, and your trust, I would never have been able to do that. And I would like to sincerely thank the member of the executive committees." And very, very nice atmosphere. And the CEO said, "Okay, no, let's place a toast. And we have the pleasure to have a very well-known scholar with us, Professor Argyris. Chris, do you have something to say?" Chris said, "Yes, I think that apparently it's unusual to have a champagne party after a cost reduction program, so apparently you must be very happy. And I don't want to interfere." And the CEO said, "No, Chris, if you have something to say, please share with us what you think." And Chris said, "I have a problem. I have a problem because, in fact, apparently you have been extremely successful in reducing costs. And I think we can congratulate the consultant. It's a great job. However, I think you learned nothing. Or at least you learned something how to become dependent. And how on this consultant, you need to become dependent to this consultant. You know that next time for something else, you will have the contact details of the consultant, which is a good thing for a consultant, not a good thing for a company." And Chris said, "I would like to ask a question. How long have you been aware, individually, the members of the executive committee, of the problems that you share with the consultant?" No answer. So the CEO turned to his team and said, "Guy, could you answer the question of Professor Argyris?" And one said, "I've been aware of that for 2 years, 3 years, 1 year." And Chris said, "May I ask another question?" And you can imagine that they were not sure it was such a good idea. And Chris said, "Yes, I would like to ask a question. Which kind of climate did you create, you, Mr. the CEO, you, the member of the executive committee, that can explain that you meet once a week? You have all been aware of that for at least 2 years, and you needed a consultant to make that discussable during your executive committee." So again, in those two examples, and as you brilliantly illustrated it before, we have two ways, two grid of analysis. One grid of analysis focuses on what we call the first order error. Too many checks, costs, single loop learning, let's reduce the number of checks. And we could speak during hours. In my example, we have no idea if it's 80, 20, but the tendency is, of course, when I push you in this direction, to focus on the number of steps. And maybe we should need more, maybe less. We don't know what is the industry, so we have no ideas. But the tendency is to focus on, okay, steps or costs. There is the second order error which allows this first order error to arise and persist. And in order to deal with the second order error, single loop learning, learning how, doing more of the same is not enough. To deal with the second order error, we need to learn why. We need to be able to think out of the box. And we need to be able to reflect on our own contribution to the program, to the problem. To what extent are we part of the problem? Self-awareness. I will show you another example. I suspect you are familiar with this exercise. 4 lines, 9 boxes. Well, who knows this exercise? Just raise your hand. So does that mean you don't know? Okay, please come here. I have a candidate. No, please. I will ask you to do something. No, at the moment, to keep the other silence, this can be done with 3 lines. Okay? So we have 9 boxes, and you need to join the 9 boxes with 4 straight lines, and you are not allowed to do 1 line, then another. They need to be connected. I'm sorry, but it's just some exercise at this time of the day. So it has nothing to do with IQ. So if you don't succeed, it's not a problem. In fact, I don't care if you succeed or not, to be honest. What is interesting for me is to have access to your mental model. What is interesting for me at the moment is to know what is in your brain, in your mind. So please just draw your mental attempts on this piece of paper. If you don't succeed, it doesn't matter. But just draw the attempts. Go. 1, 2. No, you need to continue. So it's 1, you need to start from here. Okay, but continue. It's okay. So you're here. 1, 2, 3. No, but it doesn't. 4. Okay, if we had more time, I would do that for a couple of minutes, and then I will ask some help. Who could help her?
Just take 8 points.
Huh?
Take 8 points.
Okay, but it's 9. So, can you do another attempt? She tried, but it doesn't work. But it's let's try another one. 1, 2, 3. It's a nice figure, but it doesn't work. 4. Okay, it's like drawing. Any assistance? Get outside. So open the door, please. No, it's get outside. Yes. So this is not actionable knowledge. So you need to. In other words, you can go here, for instance. So let's do it. Okay. So if you do that, 1. Then if you do this, for instance, 2. Then if you do that, 3, and this, 4. Oops, this one. You got it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. It's okay. This is a silly exercise which has nothing to do with management, but you will see there is a reason why I think it's an interesting exercise. What happened here? What happened is basically, that's the solution. This is a quote from Albert Einstein. The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. It's the same thing here. So in other words, this is an illustration of single loop and double loop learning. Single loop learning is, let's assume, okay, let's start with here. Let's assume there were only 8 boxes. It's a completely stupid exercise, but you can join the 8 boxes. So you pick in your mind a strategy, you implement it, you observe there is a match. Okay, so no need to learn, so you know how to do it. It doesn't work. So what happened? We saw our colleague here doing an attempt. It doesn't work. Say, okay, it doesn't work. So she picked another strategy in her mind. Say, okay, let's try this. It doesn't work. And we could continue like this. So single loop learning. At some point, we need to be aware to step back, reflective practitioners, to step back and say, wait a minute, if it doesn't work, I may be part of the problem. So being part of a problem is maybe the norms, the values, the convictions I have in my mind explain the way I behave. So in other words, if someone tells you, think out of the box, not actionable, you can draw outside, then say, okay, of course. We would have more time. I'm 100% sure that she would have found the solution because she has the appropriate norm in her mind, thanks to double loop learning. We don't spend our time double loop learning, we would become crazy. In other words, 10 years from now, let's assume she's back in a same kind of event, and there is a crazy professor who says, okay, let's try to join the noise thing. And then I'm sure she will be able to solve it. Not right away, but she has in mind the appropriate norm, that think out of a box. Okay, so she doesn't need to double loop learn again. That's done. So let's assume that, you know, to keep people silent, I say, okay, for those who know the answer, this can be done with 3 lines. Then I push you outside of your comfort zone. Because by just single loop learning, it doesn't work. You can try, it doesn't work. In order to do that, once again, you need to double loop learn. Yeah. You need to double loop learn and say, this is not, I need to go to infinity. So, I will cross here, oops. What happened at this precise moment in your brain? You say, hey, yeah, sure. Double loop learning just occurred at this moment. This is done. You don't need to double loop again on this exercise. That's done. You know how to join with 4, with 3. And again, I can continue. I can push you and say with 1. Say, with 1. Yeah, you take a big brush and with 1. Say, okay, of course with 1. So I can continue. Okay. So with 0 and time for... So the idea here is, in order to do that, it requires self-awareness. So when you are a manager or when you are interventionist, you have to deal with those 2 levels. One is to help organization being more efficient. The other is to help organization think out of the box. And in order to help the organization think out of the box, you need to develop self-awareness. And this is a quote from Confucius, is an archer is similar to a mature individual. When he misses his target, he turns and seeks the reason for his failure in himself. And those of you, and I think most of you are familiar with executive managers, this is very tricky because people tend to focus on blaming the others. This is never themselves. This is because of it's human being. The problem is, if you want to double loop learn, you need to be reflective, to say, okay, and then as a consultant or change agent, you need to know how to deal with defensive mechanisms, the defensive routines that people are activated in the people mind in order to protect themselves. So people say, no, I wasn't aware. So if you intervene in a company, they say, I'm customer oriented, and the switchboard is closed at 4, and it's impossible to join them. And those are evidences, those are clear clues that it's not aligned with a theory about customer orientation. There is a gap between what they say and what they do. Very often when you come back with direct observable data, you show them to the company, then you activate defensive routines. Because the people, you show them that they are part of the problems. So one of the things on which I'm personally very interested in is how to deal with defensive mechanisms. And again, in consulting coaching for change, when I teach in this program, it's precisely on this topic. Because I think a key topic is to help people becoming better in dealing with defensive mechanisms. Because those defensive mechanisms, they are key obstacles to organizational change. Thank you for your attention.